Boddington Reservoir. This place has got some serious history. Years ago, it was all tension bream fishing with the occasional great big pike. And then about 25 years ago, British Waterways taken this place over, Drayton Reservoir, Clattercut Reservoir, and they filled them full of carp from 10 ounce up to about 2 pounds, common and mirrors. And growing up, this was the place you wanted to come because you were going to get some bites. To this day on, it's full of carp, but now they're decent size, anything from sort of 5 up to 20 pound. And for me, it's one of the most exciting places to come match fishing. I love big open waters. You're never stuck, you're never finished. There's always further to go, there's more options to look at, and the fish can be anywhere. Bait is where I feel you can have a real advantage at Boddington. Everyone can buy a rod and a reel and a feeder that's suitable for getting those distances, but presenting the perfect bait, flavour, texture and colour on the bottom is where you can get a real edge. For today's session, we're mainly going to be fishing the hybrid feeder. So the most important thing is the bait we put in it and around it. And for me, it's the Cell 2mm pellets. These are so versatile. They're just a standard coarse pellet, but they've got a real nice edge to them. They've got a real selly flavoured edge to them, which creates a little bit of stickiness, so they fit around the feeder easily. And also you've got the added flavour. This time of year, I use the Cell ones. In the summer, when it's a bit more busy and the carp are really feeding, they do an activated version, which are a more meaty, fishy smell, and they're perfect in the summer months. But a little bit more refined, a little bit more settled for this time of year. I don't think you want to go over the top. These are perfect. And what we've done to make these nice and sticky and ready for the hybrid feeder is I've literally just put some in a strainer inside a bait box, flooded them with water for about 2.5 minutes, and then I've taken the strainer out of the water and let them strain off probably 5 or 10 minutes, just so all the water's off them, and then tipped them in a big bucket so they can air out, and then they will bind perfectly around a method feeder or a hybrid feeder. And what you can do also, which is a nice little tip, especially this time of year when you're looking for a little edge, a little bit of the mainline syrup. This is perfect in 2 ways. It will add a little tiny bit of stickiness to the pellets, make it even easier to use, but also gives them that additional selly smell. So there you go, just give that a good rub in. They're literally ready to go. It's important that these will stick together nicely. Good smell to those. But when you're fishing, you want it to break down evenly, so your hook bait's perfectly on show. The in vogue thing to do is always fish 2mm pellets around your feeder. They mould perfectly, they break down very easily, and they're a good food content for the fish. Adding the Cell flavoured ones gives you that slight extra edge. But for me, sometimes when it's out of a bag and it's really easy to do, I always think everyone else can do it. So one little thing I learned quite a few years ago now, good angler, good friend of mine, Simon Fry, took Barston apart by firing in boilies around his feeder. Places that get carp fished a lot, fish get used to the smell of good quality bait, and Cell, there's nothing better. So that led us into grinding down the boilies. I think Steve Ringer was the first person I knew that did it. He got freezer bait, ground it down and put a tiny little bit within his pellets, again giving you that slight extra edge. I love the hybrid, so what I do now is I grind down the hybrid bait. It's a nice bright orange colour, gives a good distinction away from the colour of the pellets. But what I like to do, I use a base mix additive. That's the hybrid activator. And what I do is I add that to my boilie crumb, so the whole bait isn't being overloaded, but those few particles in your 2mm pellets are strong, potent and attractive. Hook baits for today's session, really simple. Mainline wafters, got a few different colours and flavourings. Reason is, it's never the same twice here, but my old faithfuls I'll start on. These are the tuna wafters. These are in 8mm. These perfectly balanced with a 14 or 12 QM1 when tying it with a bayonet. They're a dumbbell shape. I think they just stand out really nice around the feeder. Dead easy to use and they do the job. I've got a few different colours, as I said. We've got my faithful pink ones, we've got some white ones, we've got some yellow pineapple ones, and we've also got some orange chocolate, bright orange ones there. Another thing I do like to do with my hook baits, I like to have a little play around. When you're sitting here and you're trying to get an edge, when everyone's doing the same, I always think maybe your hook bait can make a bit of a difference. So I get some of the mainline wafters. Lucky enough, I do a lot of work with Kev, and he's got some samples at the moment in different sizes, so I like to have a play with these. And what I've done with these ones These were the pineapple flavour, but I've just added a little bit of isotonic goo. This is quite a potent, sweet smell, but it gives a real edge to your hook bait. And I think sometimes when you're competing against other people, a standout hook bait can make all the difference. So I've literally just opened the tub of these, give it a squirt on, and just give the tub a shake, and just keep adding a little bit more till you're happy with the flavour. I've done it with a couple of others here. Slightly different additive on this one. These are the tuna ones, and I've just added a little bit of the wicked tuna goo. Haven't got that with me today, but they've got a nice smell to it as well. It sort of brightens up the hook bait as well. If you compare that one to the original pink, just gives you some more options. Always good to have a change bait and baits that do different things. So I've got some very, very simple, again, mainline have some good smells. These are the Link. These are just a little 10mm pop-up, and we've got two options. I just carry these around with me if you want to pop a hook bait up off the top of the feeder, or even off a lead right up in the water. It's a really good option. Finally, the old faithful punch box, and in here what I have, especially in the colder months, these can really turn your match around. I've got a little bit of bread which I'll punch a few sections out, squash them slightly so they're sort of semi-buoyant on the back of the hair, and I've also got a bit of the pineapple Scopex meat. This is a brilliant bait. I use this all year round, but a small punch of that hidden in the feeder so the bait's actually on the bottom, surrounded by your feed bait, is a real nice option. So there we go, not too complicated. It's just trial and error, start on your favourites and see where the session goes. Fishing through the winter months can be a little bit unpredictable, and your bait might not always work, but one bait I always like to bring with me is ground bait. This is the mainline method mix. It's a really, really powerful mix which breaks down nice and evenly, but you can wrap it around a feeder and you can cast it a million miles. What I like to do with this as well, as with all my baits, I like to give it an edge. This is quite an old-fashioned sort of method that I used to use a long time ago, but the mainline match team have brought it up to date. This is the peppered tuna flavouring. It's like a syrup, and this is just the standard method mix ground bait. And all I do is I literally pour this into the mix and then add my water. So it just gives it another edge, a bit of a peppery scent, and it still breaks down nice. This style of fishing is all about the preparation and the thinking. So getting your bait right, getting your hook baits right, and knowing while you're waiting, having a cup of tea usually, when that tip goes round, you're going to catch a good fish. On big waters like this, a lot of people think who chucks the furthest wins, but that's not necessarily true. Sometimes it does happen when there's a pressure from match anglers and those fish get pushed to those limits, but the key on a venue like this is watercraft. Learning the water, learning what the fish do, learning where the fish live and where they move to and how they behave when different types of anglers are on the water. We're pretty much ready to go. Set up in the sunshine, typical British weather, winds turn round and now it's raining. Let's hope the fishing's a little bit more consistent than the weather. Really important before we start, I've set my lines. So basically when I got here this morning, had a good look out, noticed a few fish around the 60-metre mark, so that's my starting point today. I've also done a bit of research, the recent matches, a lot of fish have been caught around that area, 60 to 70 metres. So what I've done is I've took my rods up to my sticks and I've clipped up at 60, 70, 80 and 90 metres. That way I can judge where I'm fishing and I've got room for manoeuvre as the session goes on. If the session goes to plan and we catch at 60 metres, I'll be happy to stay there all day. Clipping up at different distances is really simple. You do everything backwards. So you go to your furthest point on your sticks, clip the first one up, so let's say 90 for example, and then you count 10 back, put your next clip on at 80, and so until you've got all your distances on, and then obviously when you sit down on your box, you're in reverse. So you start at 60 and you can end up at 90. I've been fishing this venue a little bit recently and pink has been a good bet. But let's see what happens. So the feeder's loaded, first layer's on, and put a nice second layer on. Never be scared with a hybrid feeder to put your bait on too tight. It's going to be sat out there for a fair while, especially to get started with, so you want to make sure it's doing its job and working correctly, and that hook bait is nicely buried inside. There we go, all ready to go, all packed in. Time for a cast. There we go, that's gone down nicely. Really important now, I've picked a spot on the far bank. We've got a little U in the trees, and that's going to be my marker for the day. Always bear in mind that the conditions could change. I've been here before and the fog's come and you can't see anything on the far bank, so I always pick a silhouette off the far bank, which I know is going to be on show all day. More importantly, as you probably see, I'm not just throwing the rod down on the rest and making sure that line's sinking. I'm not moving the feeder. And what I do to test that is I'll just give the line a little tug just till I feel the pressure. I do not want to disturb that bait presentation. So there we go, that's nice and tight. There's a bit of tow on the water today, so hopefully it should sink nicely for me. Let's get the rod in position. Could be there for a fair while to get going. These winter months, you could wait up to half an hour, 45 minutes for a bite. But there we go, happy with that. Little bow in the line. What I like to do here as well is just loosen my clutch. Just in case, if we're moulding a feeder up and that tip goes round, the bites can be really vicious. So there we go, a little bit of slack there, gives me a little bit of time, lets that fish take the bait properly. Hopefully it won't be too long till we get one. Patience plays a massive part at this winter carp fishing game. You can't rush things, you've got to be sensible, you've got to think, how many fish am I likely to catch, or how many fish could get me into the frame in a competition? And you have to weigh that all up and plan your timings from there. So have a good flask with you, count those first few fish on a timer and see where you go from there. And be prepared to sit on your hands and let your feeder and the bait do its work. Well, there we go, that didn't take long. Very rare, quick bite for Boddington. You could be waiting a long time. But this is really important for me, this stopwatch, not just to tell me how long it takes to get a bite, but it tells me how long not to waste between bites. So now I've had a really quick bite, 3 minutes has gone. That is it, 3 minutes and the tip's gone round. I'm pretty gobsmacked, to be honest. Usually you're waiting a good 15 or 20 for the first one. But what that tells me is now, there's fish clearly in the area and they're quite happy to eat the bait. It tells me my presentation and my hook bait's working well. And also it tells me I'm not gonna sit there and wait half an hour for a bite next chuck. I'll perhaps give it 10 minutes and then we'll have another chuck and see what happens. If I had to pick a style of fishing, this would be it for me. Long distance feeder fishing for carp, perfect, everything I ever want. And on places like this, when you're talking carp from anything from 6 to 20 pound, it's the unknown, but when that tip goes round, that heart starts beating. There we go. Boddington's common carp, absolute beauty, not the biggest, but very welcome as a first one, and a quick bite. That's what we like. Cracking little fish, I'm gonna get her back. Pleased with that one, first bite nice and quickly. Can't make too many changes this chuck. Hopefully it will go around again. I've got a feeder set and ready and prepared. I'm gonna clip her on. I'm not gonna change a thing. Same hook bait, same everything. Let's get her back on the spot and hopefully for another quick bite. This one's coming in nicely. So that next chuck, my feeder's ready as before. I always make my feeders up beforehand. I don't make it up as soon as I've reared in. I'll always change feeders because I think it gives you time, especially this time of year, where you can prep that feeder to perfection. But what I'm gonna do next chuck, waited a long time for a bite then. I think we can get bites quicker. So I'm gonna try a bit of the old goo. The goo, a really easy thing to add to your bait to get a quick reaction. At Boddington, when it's coloured, I tend to use a green like a pineapple goo. So you get that scent still, but you get a real thick stream of colour, which can really make a difference. God, come on you. There he is, number 2. Look at the scale pattern on him. Cool little mirror carp. Again, not very big for Boddington, but it's another bite. I want to get him back quickly because I'm keen to get that goo on the feeder, see if it makes a difference. There we go. I like it when a plan comes together. Well, as for that chuck anyway. Put the pineapple goo on, a little bit of scent, a little bit of colour, trail of direction in the water for the fish to find the feeder. And there we go, what are we on? 9 minutes and 18 seconds. So that's nearly half the time. Can't wait for the next chuck. There we go, absolutely nailed in the bottom lip. Shows that your hook bait and hook balance is working perfectly. The hybrid feeder is the feeder to go to if you want extreme distances. As you cast, that bait's protected by the frame, so you're less likely to lose your bait on the cast, and also it's presented very differently on the bottom. The bait will spread a small amount with your hook bait directly on top. It is more, for me, the out and out winter feeder. There's lots of different sizes in the hybrid range, but for here, I like to start off on the larger feeders. It's a big expanse of water. I do want a bit of bait in my peg. So I usually start off with a 45 gram large, which will cover me up to 70, 80 meters, no problem at all. Then for the extra distances, we've got some XDs, so we can step up to 50, 55, or even 60 grams, still presenting a similar amount of bait in the feeder. As you probably noticed, I've removed the inline stem that comes with the feeder and exchanged that for the X-Safe speed stem system. This has got black elastic in it and it acts as a perfect cushion for when you're playing fish at distance, and also protects the side of the fish when at full extent. Another feature I like about the X-Safe stem, it creates the perfect bolt rig. You're fishing a heavy feeder and you're a long way out, you need the fish to pick up the bait and bolt against something so it hooks properly, and this will work perfectly with this pattern. Another nice feature which I like about it is the X-Safe stem at the end itself. It's got a quick change speed bead on the end, and this just allows your hook length to be totally free. So when there's any pressure, when you're using a loop or an inline feeder, that hook length will always try and pop out the feeder. Whereas this system, because there's no knots, there's no stiff part, this is all free, so the hook bait will always sit perfectly over your free helpings. For the hook length, I like to use 4 inches. For me, that's enough coverage over the feeder and also enough distance away from the feeder when you're playing the fish. I keep mine really, really simple. I have one hook box with all my method feeder hook lengths in. I only use QM1 hooks for this style of fishing, with a range of different accessories on the end. We've got bayonets, we've got small bands, and we've got speed stops. But for this sort of thing, when you're using boilies, I always use a bayonet. All 4 inches long, and I don't skimp on line either. A lot of people say to me, how come you're using a heavier hook length than you're using mainline? And that's simple, it's purely down to the length of line. That small amount of line has to go through so much pressure, you have to make sure it's not gonna let you down. So for me, 019 or 022 N-gauge is the perfect breaking strain. The bayonet attachment on the end of the hair is the perfect scenario for all dumbbells and boilies. For me, it's the quickest way. It's just a simple little pin that's twisted wire, and that just literally goes into the bait nice and smoothly, but grips very, very well. Another thing I like about the bayonet, because I use wafters an awful lot, it just outweighs the balance of the hook bait, so I can get away with the smallest hook possible without it lifting the whole bait off the bottom. So for an example, a size 12 could possibly lift some wafters, but with the mainline wafters, the bayonet, you just get perfect presentation. So that would just lift the hook bait off, but the hook's in perfect position, and as soon as the fish comes over it, and one tiny little movement or suck, that hook bait's going in its mouth. The middle part of a session or a match, whatever situation you're in, is really the turning point here. By the time you're at this stage, hopefully you'll know the timings of when you're getting your bites, and whether sitting on the same spot or creeping out each chuck is going to make all those differences. So at this point you have to make a big decision. Quite a typical scenario for Boddington. We've caught 3 fish at 60 metres. I've had 2 more chucks, 20-minute chucks at that as well, without a bite. That's quite normal here. What tends to happen in matches and in pleasure sessions, those fish are confidently feeding, finding your hook bait, and all of a sudden they back off. And just through experience and coming here regular, they seem to back off that way rather than coming towards you. So I've simply, this chuck, I've unclipped, so I'm going another 10 meters. So we're at 70 meters now. The bait, the rig, the dynamics of everything else is the same. It worked when the fish were there, so we've just gone that extra distance to see if we can get that extra bite. Well, there we go. I moved to 70. It's paid off quite quickly. Quick 10-minute bite. Remember, we went 2 lots of 20 minutes without a bite at 60. Just typical Boddington, that. When you're waiting this long and now we're going further, you've got to make sure that your gear is not going to let you down. So that's why we're going with the heavier hook lengths, the QM1 style hooks. So you know when you hook one, after waiting that length of time, you've got a really good chance of landing it. I'm putting quite a lot of pressure on the rod as well to keep the line nice and tight to guide the fish back. But I've also, in the back of my mind, I know that X-Safe stem, the elastic, the rubber inside the X-Safe stem is going to be doing all the hard work for me. Just like if you were fishing a pole, cushioning that fight. You know, these are harsh conditions today. It's windy, it's blowing a hoolie. We've got a powerful rod here to get the feeder where it needs to be. We need as much cushioning as possible. The QM1 hook for me is the only hook for this type of fishing. When you're using a bolt style rig, like with the heavy feeder like we've got at the minute, we've got a 45 gram large hybrid on. As soon as that fish picks up, that QM1 will turn into the fish's mouth and hook itself properly. Like every fish we've had, they've all been bottom lipped, deeply hooked, very little chance of them coming off. There we go, a crazy common. Just shows you moving out, inched out to 70 meters. We've got another bite. Shows everything's working, we're being accurate. It's all going to plan, but I still think, even in these conditions, we can find bites a little bit quicker. Got a few tricks up my sleeve that we can try, so we can put a few more in the net. Got another cracking fish. Right, before I change the feeder and put a fresh one on, I'm going to have what they call a bad chuck. And the reason for this is, it's a cheeky little thing. A lot of good anglers do, but keep it quiet. But I'm telling you, what I'm doing is I'm just loading the feeder I've just had on really roughly. I've put a bit of bait on it, not so hard, not like it's presented when I'm going out for a bite. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to chuck it in my swim and I'm going to empty it straight away, as if I've messed up the cast. And the idea is, the bait will hit the surface and you get a column and a layer of free pellets spread about everywhere. I think sometimes it just brings the fish a little bit closer back into the area and they start chewing around the area, and hopefully the cast on top of it, you'll get a quicker bite. So let's see if it works. Got a nice overloaded feeder there, plenty of bait going in. I'm just going to fire it in the swim. Oops, bad cast. So that's the bad one out the way, as we like to say. But what I'm going to do now is clip on my actual fishing feeder. So that's loaded as normal, but it's important to say as well, I know I've just put that feeder full in, it's been right on the spot, so I'm keeping the bait nice and tight, but obviously that time I released the bait on the surface. So try and get a reaction. We've got the proper feeder on now. I'm going to go with a bit of goo again, that seems to be working quite nicely today. Not over the top, just a bit. Nice bit of flavour, nice bit of smell, but I think the column of colour makes the biggest difference. Let's get her out there so we can get a quicker bite. So that little fake cast, that little spod, that little free helpings, different way of the bait falling through the water, has just attracted enough fish into the swim to find my hook bait a bit quicker. But one of the key things is accuracy. That free spod's gone in, I've had to drop that feeder right on top of it. So it's as effective as it possibly can be. And to be honest, a rod with a backbone and power and performance like this makes all the difference. Even at 70 meters, this is dropped right on top of the area. You can't ask for better than that. You're maximising your time and your effort. It looks like we're into another good fish. That's an absolute whacker. Might try that spot in again. Check that beast out. God, still full of power. You know, when we've got off the seat box and got the mat bag out, we've got a proper one. Just shows you that little changes can make all the difference. That spod and then following it in accurately over the top with the same feeder we've been fishing all day, it resulted in that absolute monster. Well happy with that one. Hardware for a session like this is pretty simple. You're looking for distance and accuracy. So for me, the Aventus distance feeder range are perfect. I've got 3 out with me today. We've got the 12-foot distance, 13-foot distance, and the Beast, the 14-foot distance. Basically, what that will do is that will cover me from everything from 40 meters through to 100 meters plus. The 12-foot will go from anything from 40 to 60 very comfortably. The 13-foot, which is my main attacking rod, that will go from 60 close to 100 without any problems. And then, as I mentioned, the big boy, the Beast, the 14-footer, that will take me to the excess, 100 meters plus if I need that extra bite. Each rod is set up with the same guides. They're reverse K guides. They're perfect for distance when you use your shot leaders, big heavy duty rings, but the line can fly through with no worries at all. Each rod has a different size of K guides to suit and complement the individual blank. All 3 rods are set up with carbon tips. The 12 and the 13-foot come with a 1.5, a 2 and a 3 ounce tip, but for today's session, I've gone all out, 3 ounce tip. They've got oversized rings, perfect to help you get that extra distance. The 14-foot, however, has got a 5 ounce tip in. This will fit all 3 rods, but it's perfect for the 14-foot just to get you those few extra yards. Moving down to the handles, part of the rod a lot of people forget about. Most people go for fashion, like a short handle that looks nice, really easy to use, but a long handle makes all the difference. After learning from the Carp boys, getting the right length handle to match the blank, you will compress the rod correctly, getting the maximum distance out of each tool. Reels, they might look horrendously big, but these are to complement each rod. They've got oversized spools, and that would just aid you getting that extra distance. The line will come off the reel quicker, but also these are the Daiwa casters and feeder reels, and they've got a real strong pulling power. So when you're casting all that distance, you're in full control reeling back. Really good reel, very fast drags, perfect for this sort of fishing. Line plays a really important part in the setup. I'm using Pulse Pro, which is a really low diameter, very low stretch line, brilliant for this style of fishing. I'm using it in 6-pound breaking strain, which might sound a little bit light, but to complement that, I'm using a shock leader. And for that, I'm using 12-pound Guru Shield. It's got no end of strength, a lot of power behind it, and it's quite dense as well. I quite like a heavy line behind my feeder, so it's not sitting dead tight. So the shock leader will fly through the rings, and then it will be lightly complemented by the 6-pound line behind, giving you the maximum distance. A lot of people ask, how do you tie your main line to a shock leader? Well, there's lots of different ways, but there's a real simple way for me. Steve Ringer, all the top anglers use this. It's the simplest way ever. All you do is a typical loop knot in your line, and then you do a 4-turn double tuck blood knot on your shock leader against your main line. Trim the tails really, really close, and you get like a little bullet nose effect, which will absolutely fly through the rings. casting, a few key things. First of all, you drop. The drop from your tip to the feeder is very important. I like to have around a metre, metre and a half. I just feel that gives you the best positioning to compress that rod to fling that feeder as far as possible. Positioning. Position yourself on your box where your legs are slightly apart so you can maximise the power through your arms. Make sure you're nice and stable and comfortable. Hands and arms. This is probably the most important thing. The power comes from your bottom arm, the arm that pulls into your body. So the length of the handle plays a big part, and that momentum pushes the feeder as far as it can possibly go. Arms need to be at full stretch and up above your head so you can create the biggest arc when pushing the power through the rod. Now you know how to cast with maximum power, accuracy is really important. Focus on that feature on the far bank. Don't move your head and look and follow your feeder behind you, and then use the power of the rod to cast through it and make sure you hit that clip perfectly every time. The final part to the process is hitting the clip, and it's not just whacking against it and letting the feeder fall in the water. You've got to drop that feeder in so it's really, really quiet and accurate so you're not going to ruin the bait on the feeder. So for me, cast through where you want to go to, hit the clip hard above your head, and then use the rod to take the power out of the feeder and follow it in so it drops in nice and quietly. Towards the end of a session is where real big differences can be made. You're in your rhythm, you've been catching fish, but now the fish are really on the feed. It's that time of day, the lights change, the fish are feeding. So whereas normally you'd be putting another fish in the net, a few tricks, that could turn into 3. Well, it's gone very slow. 2 chucks with no fish now, a 20-minute chuck, and I left that an extra 5, so another 25 minutes. Really think they're moving on out. Could go to 80 now, but I really think I need to go a bit further. So I'm going to pick the big rod up, the 14-footer, and I'm going to go straight to 90 and take a gamble in this later part of the session. See what happens. Right, here we go. Not made any changes to me bait, little bit of goo on there. One thing I have done though is stepped up to a 60-gram extra distance hybrid feeder, just help me to compress this 14-footer a bit better and hopefully get to that distance we need. Let's give her a go. Going further out, especially on this venue, is key. Pleasure fishing, probably a little bit different, but in competition, when there's lots of people on the bank and you're all competing in a very similar way, you've only got limited time for bites, so everyone tends to do the same thing where they can guarantee they're going to catch a fish. So finding that own piece of water for yourself, usually first, and as the session progresses, if you can find your own water by fishing further out than everyone else, it's going to be a winner. Here we go, here we go. Well, there we go. First cast on the big girl, the 14-footer. We went 90 metres. So decent cast in these conditions. Now the hard bit, to get it in. It's really important when you're paying fish at this sort of distance, you keep a nice constant pressure on the fish. Don't rush it. You've waited all that time for the bite. Take your time, keep constant pressure on. I like to keep the rod quite nice and low. I don't like it right up in the air. There's a lot of bird life. Anything could run into your line, and also the wind and things like that can play a part pulling on the line. So I keep it nice and low, keep the pressure on, let the fish do the work. This one's coming nicely towards us. Let that X-safe stem absorb all the pressure and keep that hook in the perfect place. As you can see, even though this is a 14-foot casting tool, it's still got a lovely progressive action, helping absorb every little movement. There you go, the shot leader's just coming through. Now for me, this is the crucial time. I like to always have my back wind on, but as you can see, I've got my clutch set as well. So in case it takes a lunge, you've got a powerful rod here. You don't want any mistakes, so I'm covering both things. but I do like to use my back wind as control. Oh, there he is. And there we go. The X-Safe doing its job there. That's a heavy feeder, 60 gram, bouncing around above the fish. But that elastic takes all the strain out of it. Here she comes, yes. There we go, not the biggest, but it was a long wait at 70, 2 casts with nothing, moved out a bit further, boom, job done. Nailed in the bottom lip. I'm not gonna have a grip and grin with this one. As you can see, the light is just starting to fade. Probably only a few chucks left in us, so I'm gonna get her back and hopefully get a bigger one. Going into the later stages of a session, you're in flow, you know where you're at, but you always need a few tricks up your sleeve. Progressing further out is working a treat today. Try and get the fish to home in a little bit quicker than what everyone else is doing. So my first layer of bait is gone on the feeder as per normal. And then in my mix, I've got some dry 2mm pellets there. Same ones I've soaked up, but these ones are dry and hard. I'm just gonna drop them into the top of my mix a few in. So what you get is when that first layer breaks down on top of the feeder, you get a few pop up, and I think it attracts fish even more. I'm gonna give it a little tiny piece of goo because I don't want it to affect those little dry pellets too much. We'll get it back out there and see if we can get that bite time down. Well, the sun's gone down, had to have one more chuck, and it's gone round again. Been quite a typical day at Boddington for me. Followed them fish out, as they tend to do, but bringing those little changes at each different cast, making those few little things, we've got some quicker bites, and we've made the difference from probably putting 3 or 4 fish on the bank to 10 or 12. Nothing more pleasing than a Boddington bite. And these carp, even though it's going cold, don't give in. Well, look at that for an absolute scrapper to finish with. Lovely common carp, probably getting close to 8 to 10 pound, but what a session. Just shows you, winter's here, we've plodded away on the hybrid feeder, using all different little techniques along the way, the right gear to get to the right positions, being effective as we possibly can. And that's your reward. What a fantastic day. See you, mate. Brilliant. Time to get wrapped up and go and have a brew.